Ralph has taught, he has a PhD, he has two very highly regarded biographies of Hermann Hesse and Rilke, and is known all over the world for those works. He's taught at, most recently at Emory, but also taught at Harvard?
Princeton,
one of those big universities. University of Iowa.
And University of Iowa.
University of Iowa, which for those of you who know about the writing program there. And this is now Ralph's second book of fiction or first book of fiction?
My second book of fiction.
So
But the first one I wrote when I wanted to publish when I was 27 years old in 1947.
So he decided that every 50 years he should write. And I think that we should all do the same. So Ralph's a particular friend of ours, and we're really glad that he's here. He's come to Salon before, but I think this is your first reading.
My first reading?
Yeah.
Absolutely, but
Okay.
I've been here many times.
So anything else that we need to know, Ralph, before you kick it
Well,
off?
I just want to say I'm very grateful. This is very different from what we just heard. This is a very conventional kind of fiction. It won a prize for historical fiction, I might mention. And it's really, I've treated it as an important part of American history, the McCarthy period, which was set in Seattle, Washington, when I was an undergraduate there, and I've never forgotten what went on there in relation to the teachers whom I loved and everything. So
and I believe you'll have some for sale, won't you?
Pardon?
You'll have some for sale, won't you?
Books? Yeah,
Yes,
if anybody's
okay.
interested, sure. Yes, I do.
And Ralph, do you have enough light to read by?
And also, pardon?
Do you have enough light?
I moved over here. I think I do now. Yeah.
Okay.
If not, you'll hear me stumble. Anyway, it is historical fiction and a very important part that I experienced after I've been in this country. I've been through the war, 4 years in the U.S. Army, and then coming back to this kind of thing in Seattle, and that was kind of difficult to take at the time. And many years I've been trying to work this out in my head. And so I finally wrote and published this novel called Rule the Day. And yes, indeed, if anybody wants to get it, I hate to be hustlerish, but it's $15. Anybody wants to come and get it, I'd be very happy to serve you. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just read two things. First, here's my hero. By the way, he isn't me. The hero meets the woman he then eventually will marry in the war, in the war scene in Italy, and in the second part where he betrays her. And these are the two sections that I want to read to you. So I'm going to read first from the start of the book. Prologue. Wars, all wars, create winds of chaos that blow long after the last shot is fired. World War II was no exception. Jacob and Francesca, like Dante's Paolo and Francesca, are caught up in those winds. Jacob, haunted by overwhelming fear caused by persecution in his past, damages himself and those he loves. Francesca, hardened by the war, finds it impossible to forgive. And that's the beginning. Chapter 1, 1945 to 47. Jacob Becher pushed the tent flap aside and exhaled the a lungful of stale air he'd endured for hours. The snores of the three men behind him in their sleeping bags blended with the whistle of the sharp wind blowing from the mountains. The chill of icy fresh air took his breath away, and a tear threatened to freeze on his cheek. It must have been somewhere around 0. The first step proved that. He slipped and almost fell on the frozen footpath. Last night's snow had melted, and the slush had turned into ugly, jagged ice. He looked northward at the Apennines across the valley. This damn hostile wind came from those mountains on the other side where the Germans were entrenched. He was afraid. He had fled Germany with his parents in February 1939 when he was still 23, propelled by fear of further persecution as a dissident Jew. The entire family immigrated together to the United States. Never since his flight had he felt such intense dread of the enemy. Still, he had to do his duty. Colonel Riggs had called him into his trailer last night. "Yes, sir?" The old man grinned. "At ease, Becker. I've got a new assignment for you, a snap. All you have to do is take your jeep across to those mountains and meet an Italian partisan, a partigiana, actually. They'll tell me she's been working with the resistance. She'll pass you some documents from where she worked undercover in German headquarters yet. She refuses to cross the lines and bring them to us, afraid she'll be caught, I expect. Close to the German lines? My nightmares have entangled me in an assignment like this for months. I got away from them once, but by God, I can't make it a second time." He felt his body, his face turning to granite. It was not the most dangerous assignment. He had risked more in the past, but this one was so damn personal. Stolen enemy documents? He'd be shot without question if he was caught. His stony mouth could still form a few tense words. "I understand, sir," Riggs elaborated. "That woman knows German, of course, so you can work together. These documents are indispensable for our next offensive. The Partigiana will give you all the info you need to read these verbally, so it had to be you." "I see." Jacob's throat closed and cut off any protest. "We've got to maintain absolute secrecy, Lieutenant, so you can't take a driver." Hadn't he been driving for hours? His watch told him otherwise. But in rough conditions stretched the time. The icy road winding ever higher between smothering stands of black pines became increasingly perilous. Fear, more than the penetrating cold, froze his hands to the wheel. As bright bursts of artillery closed in on both sides. The jeep skidded and bucked over new snowfall, blanketing the rutted sheet of ice, and as he neared the forward lines, the tight switchbacks grew steeper and narrower. At last, a human shape crouched under a dwarf pine. He slowed to stop, and the tall figure rose from the roadside and without hesitation clambered into the jeep. He drove on, not glancing sideways. Yes, a woman surprisingly young, dressed in faded fatigues, short brown hair, a graceful profile. She sat next to him, silent and erect, her arms locked around a worn briefcase on her lap. He could not see her eyes fixed on the road ahead. He should be the first to speak, but it was she, turning to glance at him, who broke the silence, and in German, the hair on his neck prickled. "Mein Name ist Olga. Sie sind Tenente Becker." "Si," he emphasized his scant Italian, "Jacopo Becker." He drove on in limbo, in no man's land. Icicles hung like glittering knives from shrubs and low pine branches. The sky was gunmetal blue. Despite heavy gloves, his fingers began to ache. Her sudden quiet presence increased his discomfort. His orders told him to hide the jeep where she would indicate, then follow her on foot to a safe house. There she would deliver the documents and explain their contents. He spoke thoughtlessly in English. "Where's the house?" She seemed puzzled, but must have caught the word house. "Presto." Her voice sounded light and pleasant. A heavy jolt. The jeep hit a pothole,